Okay, boys and girls, hi, how are you? We're going to continue with Charlotte's Web. So our next chapter, this is chapter 6. It's called Summer Days. The last chapter we just read was the one called Charlotte, where Wilbur finally met Charlotte and has made a new friend. And she was up in the doorway waving to him from her spider web. Here's that picture if you remember. And he was a little surprised that she would catch and eat flies. So they were learning some things about each other in that chapter. And now Wilbur has gone to bed knowing that he has a brand new, wonderful friend in Charlotte. All right, so chapter 6 is called Summer Days. It says, the early summer days on a farm are the happiest and fairest of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air sweet and then fade. Apple blossoms come with the lilacs, and the bees visit around the apple trees. The days grow warm and soft. School ends, and children have time to play and fish in the stream. Avery often brought a trout home in his pocket, warm and stiff, and ready to be fried for supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every day to sit quietly on her stool. The animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay calmly at her feet. Around the 1st of July, the workhorses were hitched to the mowing machine, and Mr. Zuckerman climbed into the seat and drove into the field. All morning you could hear the rattle of the machine as it went around and around while the tall grass fell down behind the cutter bar in long green swatches. Next day, if there was no thunder, all hands would rake it and pitch it and load it up, and the hay would be hauled into the barn in a high wagon. Fern and Avery got to ride on top of the load. The hay would be hoisted sweet and warm into the big loft until the whole barn seemed like a wonderful bed of sweet-smelling timothy and clover. It was fun to jump in and perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find a little grass snake in the hay and would add it to the other things in his pocket. Early summer days are a jubilee time for birds. In the early summer, there were plenty of things for a child to eat and drink, dandelion stems full of milk, clover heads with nectar. The fridge was always filled with ice-cold drinks. Everywhere you look is life. Even the little balls of dew on the weed stalks, if you poked it apart, had little green worms inside of it. And on the underside of the leaf, sometimes of the potato vine, you would find those little orange potato bugs. It was on a day in the early summer that the goose eggs finally hatched. This was a very important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know the goslings had at last arrived. The goose knew a day in advance they were coming. She could hear their weak little voices calling from inside the egg. She knew that they were in desperately cramped positions inside the shell and were anxious to get out, so she sat quite still and talked a lot less than usual. When the first gosling poked its green-gray head out of the goose's feathers and looked around, Charlotte spied it immediately and made a very important announcement. I am sure, she said, that every one of us here will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of our friend the goose, she now has something to show for it. The goslings have arrived. May I offer my sincere congratulations? Thank you, thank you, thank you, said the goose, nodding and bowing shamelessly. Thank you, said the gander. Congratulations, shouted Wilbur. How many goslings are there? I can only see one. There are 7, said the goose. Fine, said Charlotte. 7 is a lucky number. Luck had nothing to do with this, said the goose. It was good management and hard work. At this point, Templeton showed his nose from his hiding place under Wilbur's trough. He glanced at Fern and crept cautiously towards the goose, keeping very close to the wall. Everyone watched him, for he was not well liked and not trusted. Look, he said in his very sharp voice, you say you have 7 goslings. There were 8 eggs. What happened to the other egg? Why didn't it hatch? It's a dud, I guess, said the goose. Well, what are you going to do with it? Said Templeton, his little round beady eyes fixed on the goose. You can have it, said the goose. Roll it away and add it to that nasty collection of yours. Templeton had a habit of picking up unusual objects and storing them in his home. He saved everything. Certainly, said the gander. You may have the egg, but I'll tell you, Templeton, if I ever catch you poking your head around my goslings, I'll give you the worst pounding a rat ever took. And the gander opened his strong wings and beat them in the air to show his power. He was strong and brave, but the truth is, both the goose and the gander were worried about Templeton, and with good reason. This rat could not be trusted. He was not always kind, and they never knew what he might do. Here, okay, there you can see. All right, so there's Templeton in the front. So a gander is a male or a boy goose, and then there's the female on the eggs, and there's Fern, and see Charlotte up in her web up there? Yep, there we go. And then Wilbur in the background, right behind the goose, or behind the gander. You see him? Okay, so they didn't trust Templeton. With her broad bill, the goose pushed the unhatched egg out of the nest, and the entire company watched in disgust. Even Wilbur, who could eat almost anything, was appalled. Imagine wanting a junky old rotten egg, he muttered. A rat is a rat, said Charlotte. She laughed a tinkling little laugh. But my friends, if that ancient egg ever breaks, this barn will be unbearable. What does that mean? Asked Wilbur. It means nobody will be able to live here on account of the smell. A rotten egg is a regular stink bomb. I won't break it, snarled Templeton. I know what I'm doing. I handle stuff like this all the time. He disappeared into his tunnel, pushing the goose egg in front of him. He pushed and nudged till he succeeded in rolling it into his lair under the trough. That afternoon, when the wind had died down and the barnyard was quiet and warm, the gray goose led her 7 goslings off the nest and out into the world. Mr. Zuckerman spied them when he came in with Wilbur's supper. Well, hello there, he said, smiling. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7 baby geese. Now, isn't that lovely? All right, so chapter 7, we're going to read one more, is called Bad News. Let's see. Wilbur liked Charlotte better and better each day. Her campaign against insects seemed sensible and useful. Hardly anybody around the farm had a good word to say for a fly. Flies usually spent their time pestering others. The cows didn't like them, the horses didn't like them, the sheep didn't like them, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were always complaining about them. Wilbur admired the way Charlotte managed. He was particularly glad she was always put her victim to sleep before she would eat it. That's very thoughtful of you, Charlotte, he said. Yes, she replied in her sweet voice. I always give them a little medicine so they won't feel any pain, just an extra service I throw in. As the days went by, Wilbur grew and grew. He ate 3 big meals a day and spent long hours lying on his side, half asleep, dreaming pleasant dreams. He enjoyed good health, and he gained a lot of weight. One afternoon, when Fern was sitting on her stool, the oldest sheep walked into the barn and stopped to pay a call to Wilbur. Hello, she said. Seems to me you're putting on some weight. Yes, I guess I am, said Wilbur. At my age, it's a good idea to keep gaining. Just the same, I don't envy you, said the old sheep. You know why they're fattening you up, don't you? No, said Wilbur. Well, I don't like to spread the bad news, said the sheep, but they're fattening you up because they're going to do away with you. They're going to what? Screamed Wilbur. Fern grew rigid on her stool. They're going to do away with you, turn you into bacon and ham, said the old sheep. Almost all young pigs. It happens to when the cold weather set in. Everybody's in on it. Lurvy, Zuckerman, even Mr. Arable. Mr. Arable, sobbed Wilbur. Fern's father? Certainly. Pigs are used to make the bacon and the ham. I'm an old sheep, and I see the same thing year after year. Stop, screamed Wilbur. I don't want to die. Save me, somebody, save me. Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. Wilbur, be quiet, said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation. I can't be quiet, screamed Wilbur, racing up and down. I want to stay here in the barn. Is it true what the old sheep says? Is it true that what's going to happen when the cold weather comes? Well, said the spider, plucking thoughtfully at her web, the old sheep has been around the barn for a long time. She has seen many a spring pig come and go. If she says that's the plan, then it's probably true. Here he is. Oh, poor Wilbur. There's the old lamb, bursting into tears. Wilbur burst into tears again. I want to live, he moaned. I want to stay here in my comfortable manure pile with all my friends and breathe the beautiful air and the beautiful eye and the beautiful sun. Well, you're certainly making a beautiful noise, snapped the old sheep. I want to live, screamed Wilbur, throwing himself on the ground. You shall live, said Charlotte briskly. What? Really? Cried Wilbur. Who's going to save me? I am, said Charlotte. But how? Asked Wilbur. That remains to be seen. But I'm going to save you, and I want you to quiet down immediately. You're carrying on. I want you to stop your crying, because I can't stand hysterics. Hysteric means when you get so upset you can't control your emotions. And you can see by looking at Wilbur, oh my goodness, he is hysterical, isn't he? All upset. But Charlotte has a plan to help save Wilbur. So this is the next chapter, which is chapter 8, and that's called A Talk at Home. And we're going to read that one tomorrow and see how does Charlotte plan on helping Wilbur and saving his life. So have a great day, boys and girls. I will see you for more Charlotte's Web tomorrow.